My name is Julia Miller. I'm 42 years old. I built a tech company from nothing. No family money, no safety net, just long nights, caffeine, and a refusal to fail. While other people were learning how to send emails, I was writing code in a rented basement and praying the servers wouldn't crash. Years later, that basement became a multi-million-dollar empire, and standing in the center of the Hilton Manhattan East Grand Ballroom that Saturday night, I thought I was celebrating the greatest proof that success meant something when shared. My husband, Daniel Williams, was launching his dream law firm. For 2 years, I had backed that dream with everything I had: money, time, belief. $20 million to be exact. Every polished mahogany desk, every floor-to-ceiling window overlooking Manhattan. Every champagne flute raised that night existed because I believed in him. 500 guests filled the room: judges, senior partners, journalists, people whose opinions shaped legal careers. The air smelled like ambition and expensive perfume. Crystal chandeliers glinted overhead, reflecting off marble floors polished so perfectly they looked unreal. I should have felt proud. Instead, a comment I overheard sliced straight through my chest. A young associate leaned toward his friend, smirking. "Well," he whispered, not quietly enough. "Looks like the trial wife showed up." Trial wife. I didn't stop walking. I didn't react. I smiled the way women learn to smile when something cuts deep and public. But something cold twisted inside me, sharp and unmistakable. Then Daniel stepped onto the stage. He looked flawless, confident, radiant in the glow of applause. He thanked the crowd, spoke about justice, legacy, vision. The words flowed easily, the same words I had listened to him rehearse at our kitchen table at midnight. And then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a plain manila envelope. The room shifted. "I have one final piece of business to attend to," he said, voice smooth. He walked off the stage. Toward me. Every step echoed like a countdown. When he stopped inches away, close enough for me to smell his cologne, he smiled, not with love, not with gratitude, but with something colder. "Julia," he said clearly for everyone to hear, "the first case my firm will handle is my divorce." He placed the envelope in my hands. "Please sign and leave." Applause erupted. Phones came out. And in that moment, with $20 million funding my own humiliation, I realized something profound. They thought this was the end of my story. They were wrong. Before that night, before the envelope, the applause, the calculated smile, I genuinely believed I understood my life. I believed in effort, in partnership, in building something together instead of alone. I met Daniel Williams 8 years earlier, during his final year of law school. I had just sold my second startup and was still adjusting to the strange reality of financial security after years of survival mode. Daniel was everything I wasn't trying to be anymore. Idealistic, eloquent, burning with the kind of moral certainty only young lawyers still have. He talked about justice the way some people talk about religion. Over coffee that first afternoon, he told me he didn't want to work for a soulless, white-shoe firm. He wanted to open his own practice someday, a firm that mattered, one that fought the right battles, represented the right people, and carried his name with integrity. I fell for him slowly, and then all at once. Daniel was attentive, charming in a quiet way, and deeply proud of his intellect. He listened when I talked about algorithms and product launches, even if he didn't fully understand them. He made me feel less like a machine built for productivity and more like a woman allowed to rest. When he proposed, he did it simply. No crowd, no spectacle, just the two of us in our apartment, his hands shaking slightly as he held out the ring. I said yes, without hesitation. The early years of marriage were peaceful. Not perfect, but steady. I worked relentlessly. He clerked, then joined a respected firm. Dinners were late, conversations often revolved around work. But I told myself this was normal for two ambitious people building parallel futures. The first time he mentioned opening his own firm again, it was over wine on a Sunday night. "Not yet," he said, swirling his glass, "but someday, when the time is right." That someday crept closer with every promotion he didn't get, every partner meeting that left him frustrated, every story about politics and favoritism in the legal world. When he finally said, "I think I'm ready," I didn't hesitate. I had the capital. He had the vision. I offered to help. What I told myself was that this was marriage, supporting each other's dreams. What I didn't admit, even to myself, was that I liked being needed. After years of being self-reliant, being someone's safety net felt meaningful. Over the next 2 years, my money quietly reshaped his dream into something enormous. Office lease on Madison Avenue. State-of-the-art systems, recruitment bonuses to lure top lawyers, marketing campaigns, furniture imported from Italy. Every time I asked, "Is this necessary?" Daniel smiled and said, "If we're doing this, we do it right." So we did. What I didn't see, or maybe didn't want to see, were the small shifts. The way he stopped asking my opinion and started informing me. The way my presence at firm events became optional. The way his gratitude slowly turned into entitlement. His father, a respected judge, was polite but distant. His brother treated the firm like it was already a dynasty. And somewhere along the way, I became less his wife and more infrastructure. I ignored it. I told myself relationships evolve, that ambition has growing pains, that love isn't measured by attention, but by trust. By the time the launch party was planned, by the time 500 people were invited to celebrate his arrival, I thought we were standing at the beginning of something extraordinary. I didn't realize I was standing at the edge of a trap that had been 2 years in the making. Looking back, the warning signs weren't loud. They were quiet, subtle, easy to excuse if you wanted to excuse them. The first shift came after Daniel hired his business partner, Evan Cross. Brilliant litigator, polished, the kind of man who shook hands like he was already calculating your worth. Evan came from the kind of legal family that produced judges and senators, and he fit effortlessly into rooms that still required effort from me. At first, I told myself it was good for Daniel to have someone like that beside him. But Evan didn't treat me like a partner. He treated me like background noise. Whenever I visited the office, conversations would pause just a beat too long. Smiles would tighten. Decisions that affected millions of my dollars were suddenly already handled. Daniel started saying things like, "You don't need to worry about this part," or "It's legal stuff. You wouldn't enjoy it anyway." I noticed my name disappearing from emails. I noticed meetings scheduled without telling me. I noticed that when people congratulated Daniel, they rarely looked at me. At home, the dynamic shifted too. Dinner conversations turned one-sided. He spoke about the firm with a proprietary pride that no longer included me. When I asked questions, he grew impatient. "You're overthinking," he'd say. "Can't you just trust me?" Trust. That word became his shield. His family's involvement intensified as well. His father began dropping by the office. His brother spoke openly about the firm's future, as if it were already a generational legacy. And somehow, I was never part of those conversations. I started feeling like a guest in a world I had funded. The strangest part was how Daniel began reframing our history. He'd joke in public about how lucky he was to have a wife who didn't mind being in the background. He introduced me as my wife Julia, the tech one, like a footnote. Once at a charity dinner, someone asked how involved I was in the firm. Before I could answer, Daniel laughed. "She just writes the checks," he said. Everyone laughed with him. I smiled. But inside, something cracked. Late at night, lying beside him while he slept, I replayed moments I'd dismissed. The defensiveness, the entitlement, the way his ambition no longer sounded like our future, but his escape. I thought about the contracts I'd signed, the documents my lawyer insisted on, the structures I put in place not because I didn't love him, but because I had built my life on not being naive. When I asked Daniel if we should review the financials together, he kissed my forehead and said, Relax, you're my wife, not my investor. That sentence sat heavy in my chest, because the truth was, I was both, and he had started acting like I was neither. By the time the launch party approached, the distance between us was no longer emotional. It was strategic. He was preparing for something. I just didn't know yet that I was the obstacle he planned to remove. The night of the launch party arrived, wrapped in excess and expectation. I arrived early, as I always did. Not because anyone asked me to, but because some habits never leave you. I walked through the grand ballroom while staff were still adjusting centerpieces and testing the lights. The chandeliers blazed overhead, crystal catching light like tiny prisms. Everything gleamed. Everything I paid for. Daniel was already there, surrounded by people I barely recognized anymore. He looked right through me when I approached, then smiled as if remembering something. "Oh, hey," he said, distracted. "You look great." That was it. No thank you. No acknowledgement of the 2 years it took to build this night. Just a compliment tossed like loose change. By the time the guests arrived, the room had transformed into a living monument to ambition. Champagne fountains cascaded, ice sculptures reflected flashes from cameras. Judges clustered near the bar. Journalists hovered like sharks, waiting for a story. I floated through the room like a ghost with a smile. People congratulated me, but always in the same way you congratulate someone for supporting greatness, not creating it. "Daniel's so lucky to have you. You must be proud of him. This is such a big night for your husband. Not our achievement. His." I stood near the back as Daniel was introduced. The applause was thunderous. He walked onto the stage with ease, posture perfect, confidence polished. The same confidence I had funded, nurtured, protected. He spoke beautifully. He thanked mentors, his father, his brother, his partner, the city, the legal community. He did not thank me, not once. Then he paused. The room quieted. "I have one last matter to address before we officially open our doors," he said. I felt it before I understood it. A tightening in my chest, a wrongness in the air. Daniel reached into his jacket and pulled out a plain manila envelope. It looked absurd against the luxury around us. He stepped down from the stage. The crowd parted. I could hear whispers rising, curiosity turning sharp. When he stopped in front of me, he leaned in slightly, lowering his voice, but not enough. "Don't make this difficult," he murmured. Then, louder for everyone, "Julia, you've been very generous, very supportive, and for that, I thank you." His smile was wrong. "I want everyone here to know that the first case Williams & Cross LLP will be handling is deeply personal." He placed the envelope in my hands. "Our divorce." The room inhaled as one. "Please sign," he continued, "and leave tonight." For a heartbeat, the world stopped. Then applause. Not polite applause. Enthusiastic. Shocked. Hungry. I looked down at the envelope. My name printed neatly on the front. Divorce papers prepared, planned, timed for maximum spectacle. This wasn't impulsive. This was calculated. Phones were already recording, faces twisted with fascination. I could see Evan Cross watching from across the room, arms folded, satisfaction barely concealed. This was never just about divorce. This was about erasing me, turning the woman who funded everything into an inconvenience, removed cleanly and publicly. I felt humiliation burn through me, but beneath it, something else stirred. Clarity. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I folded the envelope carefully and slipped it into my clutch. Then I met Daniel's eyes. "Of course," I said softly. The smile on his face flickered. I turned and walked toward the exit. Behind me, applause followed. Outside, the cold New York air hit my face like mercy. The noise muted, the lights softened. I stood on the sidewalk, city reflections shimmering on wet pavement, and breathed. And then I smiled, because they thought they had won, and they had no idea what they had just triggered. I didn't go home right away. I walked. Block after block, heels in my hand, cold pavement grounding me with every step. My phone buzzed nonstop inside my bag. Calls, messages, notifications lighting up like fireworks. But I didn't look. Not yet. Shock isn't loud. It's quiet. It's the strange calm that settles when your brain refuses to accept what your eyes have already seen. By the time I reached my apartment on the Upper East Side, my hands were steady. Too steady. That scared me more than tears would have. I locked the door behind me, leaned my back against it, and slid down to the floor. 8 years. That's how long it took for a marriage to be reduced to an envelope passed like a prop in front of an audience. I replayed the moment over and over. Daniel's voice, the timing, the applause, the way he never once looked uncertain, the way this had clearly been rehearsed, approved, encouraged. I thought of the nights I stayed up reviewing budgets while he slept. The conversations where I asked if he was overwhelmed, if he needed help, if we were still okay. You're overthinking. Just trust me. I laughed then, a small, broken sound that surprised me. Trust. I poured myself a drink, 3 fingers of the good whiskey I saved for moments that mattered. My reflection in the window stared back at me, composed, pale, eyes sharper than I remembered. I opened the envelope. The papers were flawless, professionally drafted, terms already outlined. He wanted me gone, quietly, quickly, cleanly. No discussion, no respect. I felt the urge to scream rise up and then dissolve. Because beneath the pain, beneath the betrayal, there was something colder and far more dangerous. Awareness. I hadn't just been his wife. I'd been his financier, his contingency, his foundation. And unlike him, I hadn't walked into this blind. I stood, walked into my study, and pushed aside the leather chair. Behind the custom bookshelf, a hidden panel slid open, revealing the safe I hadn't touched in months. Inside were binders, neatly labeled, obsessively organized. Williams and Cross LLP. I pulled the first one free and placed it on the desk. As I turned the pages, my breathing slowed. Every transfer documented, every lease in my name, every investment structured as business, not marital, support. I remembered my lawyer teasing me gently years earlier. "Julia," she'd said, "you're married, not merging corporations." I'd smiled and answered, "I know. That's why I'm being careful." Careful? That word tasted different now. As I flipped through the contracts, something shifted inside me. The humiliation lost its grip. The pain dulled. Not because it mattered less, but because it was being replaced. With focus. With control. By 3 a.m., my phone had stopped buzzing. They were probably panicking now. I poured another drink, sat back, and allowed myself one final thought before action replaced emotion. They thought tonight was about power. They had no idea whose power they were standing on. Monday morning didn't arrive quietly. It crashed. My phone started buzzing at 6:28 a.m., vibrating itself across the nightstand like it was trying to escape. I watched it without touching it, Daniel's name flashing again and again, followed by Evan's, then unknown numbers, then messages stacking faster than I could read. I didn't answer a single one. I showered slowly, dressed carefully, made coffee like it was any other morning. The discipline of routine steadied me, sharpened the edge that had been forming since Saturday night. At 7:12 a.m., I opened my laptop. I didn't rush. I didn't panic. I logged in. The firm's banking portal loaded in seconds. It's still accessible. Of course it was. When you fund something from the ground up, you don't lock yourself out of the foundation. The numbers appeared exactly where I expected them to be. Operating account, $847,000. Money market reserves, $1.2 million. Expense accounts, active, indulgent, recently used. I felt a smile pull at the corner of my mouth. Not joy, not revenge. Precision. I started small. Automatic payments, utilities, cleaning services, coffee vendors, paused for account verification. Not canceled, just delayed. The kind of delay that makes people nervous but not alarmed. Vendor invoices from the launch party? Frozen, pending review. Catering company? florist, audio-visual crew. Each click was quiet, professional, clean. Then payroll. I hovered for a moment, not out of mercy, but calculation. Innocent people would feel this first. Associates, assistants, staff who had no idea what game they were playing. But consequences don't arrive neatly. I initiated a temporary hold. Manual verification required. Nothing permanent. Just enough. By 9:30 a.m., the calls intensified. By 10 o'clock, the doorman buzzed. "Ms. Miller," he said carefully, "there's a young woman here from your husband's firm. She says it's urgent." I let her up. Sophie Lang stood in my doorway like someone bracing for impact. Her hair was pulled into a messy bun, mascara streaked beneath red-rimmed eyes. "Everything's falling apart," she said before I could speak. "Payroll didn't go through. Vendors are calling nonstop. The office coffee service shut us off. The catering company is threatening legal action." I stepped aside and let her in. She clutched her phone like a lifeline. "They're in a meeting right now," she continued, voice shaking. "Mr. Williams, Daniel, he's furious. Mr. Cross hasn't stopped yelling." I handed her a cream-colored envelope. "Give this to Daniel," I said evenly. "Personally." She looked at it like it was radioactive. "What is it?" "My terms." Her mouth opened, closed. "He has 24 hours, I added. "After that, this conversation changes." She nodded. That afternoon, the legal community began to stir. Whispers spread, vendors talked, staff panicked. And by evening, Daniel's father called. I let it go to voicemail. "Julia," his voice said later, controlled but strained. "This situation is becoming complicated. I suggest we speak." Complicated. That was one word for it. By Tuesday morning, the pressure escalated. Board members, advisors, people who had applauded on Saturday now wanted clarity. Evan's name surfaced repeatedly. Unavailable, unreachable, handling personal matters. I knew what that meant. Fear fractures alliances quickly. By Wednesday, the real blow landed. I invoked subsection 7.3, silent partner withdrawal. Immediate asset recovery in the event of material breach of fiduciary responsibility. Public humiliation. Abuse of authority. Ethical misconduct. All documented. All undeniable. The withdrawal request processed without ceremony. $20 million. Pending transfer. The firm's foundation cracked. By Thursday night, Daniel sent a single text. "We need to talk," I replied once. Friday, 9 a.m., conference room. When I walked into Williams & Cross LLP the next morning, the atmosphere had changed completely. No champagne, no smiles, just exhaustion and fear. Daniel sat at the head of the table, his suit wrinkled, his eyes hollow. Evan's chair was empty. "Where's your partner?" I asked calmly. Daniel swallowed. "Unavailable." I laid the documents out one by one. Restructuring terms, leadership changes, consequences. "This is what happens," I said, voice steady, "when you mistake support for weakness." His hands shook as he reached for the pen. For the first time in years, Daniel Williams looked at me. Not above me, not past me, but at me. And he finally understood. Victory doesn't feel the way people think it does. By Friday afternoon, after the signatures, after the silence, after the doors closed behind me, I expected relief. Instead, I felt hollow. The firm was still standing, for now. My money was returning, my control had been reasserted. On paper, I had won. But that night, alone in my apartment, the noise finally caught up to me. I sat on the edge of my bed, heels kicked off, dress still on, staring at nothing. The city hummed outside, cars, sirens, life continuing as if mine hadn't cracked open. 8 years doesn't vanish cleanly. I replayed moments that had nothing to do with money. The way Daniel used to trace circles on my wrist when we watched movies. The way he looked proud when I spoke at conferences. The mornings when we moved around each other in silence, comfortable, and familiar. Had any of it been real, or had I simply been useful? That question lodged in my chest and refused to move. I opened my phone and scrolled, something I hadn't allowed myself to do all week. The video was everywhere. Tech CEO publicly divorced at law firm launch. Power move or revenge play? Behind the collapse of Williams & Cross, LLP, strangers debated my character like it was a case study. Some praised my restraint. Others called me cold, calculated, vindictive. No one asked how it felt to be applauded while being discarded. I turned the phone face down. This wasn't about public opinion. It was about the quiet truth I couldn't escape. I had loved him, and love doesn't evaporate just because logic wins. For the first time since Saturday, I cried. Not dramatically, not loudly, just enough to acknowledge the loss. The marriage wasn't what I thought it was, but it had still been mine. I slept poorly that night. Dreams blurred into memories. Apologies Daniel never gave. Conversations we never finished. In one dream, he reached for me, and I stepped back, already gone. Morning came too quickly. I brewed coffee I didn't drink, stood in the shower until the water ran cold. And when I finally looked at myself in the mirror, I saw a woman who had survived, but hadn't healed. That was the lowest point. Not the public humiliation, not the betrayal, not even the divorce. It was realizing that strength doesn't protect you from grief. It just gives you the capacity to endure it. That afternoon, an email arrived from an address I didn't recognize. Short. Simple. If you're looking for something real, come see what we're building. It was from Lydia Torres, director of a small legal aid organization in Brooklyn I vaguely remembered hearing about through a colleague. I almost deleted it. Almost. Something in the wording stopped me. Not desperation, not flattery, purpose. I stared at the screen for a long time before replying. When? Her response came immediately. Tomorrow. I didn't know it then, but that email marked the end of my darkest chapter and the beginning of something I never planned to need. The townhouse in Brooklyn didn't look like anything important. No marble lobby, no security desk, no glass walls announcing success to the world. Just a narrow brick building tucked between a laundromat and a corner cafe, its front door scuffed, its windows crowded with handwritten notices. Phoenix Legal Collective. I almost laughed at the contrast. Inside, the air was warm and chaotic. Phones rang, printers hummed. People moved quickly through cramped hallways, carrying overstuffed files. Whiteboards were covered in deadlines and case names written in different colors, overlapping and urgent. And standing in the middle of it all was Lydia Torres. Early 30s, sharp eyes, sleeves rolled up. She shook my hand like she meant it. Thank you for coming, she said. I know you're busy. Busy. That word had meant boardrooms and deadlines for years. Here, it meant families waiting for answers. Lydia showed me everything. The eviction cases stacked floor to ceiling. The immigration appeals. The wage theft claims no major firm would touch because there wasn't enough money in them. This, she said quietly, gesturing to a bulletin board covered in thank you notes and children's drawings, is why we're here. I read one. Thank you for helping my mom keep our home. Something shifted. We sat in a cramped office with mismatched chairs and coffee that tasted like it had been reheated too many times. If you had funding, I asked, real funding, what would you do? She didn't hesitate. Expand to all 5 boroughs. Hire attorneys who care but can't afford to work for free. Train law students who want to help but can't survive unpaid internships. Make justice accessible, not performative. No talk of prestige, no brand building, just work. I thought about the ballroom, the applause, the envelope. Then I wrote $10 million. No clauses, no silent partnership, no leverage. Just belief. Lydia, this would save us, she said quietly. No, I replied. This saves me. For the not victorious. Aligned. That evening, I sent one final message to Daniel. I'm done. Over the next 2 weeks, Phoenix Legal Collective transformed. And slowly, so did I. I guest lectured at Columbia, joined ethics panels, spoke about documentation, not revenge. People stopped asking about the divorce. One night, after a long meeting, Lydia and I sat on the townhouse steps, eating takeout, talking about law and systems and the quiet ways power shapes lives. She looked at me and said, "You know, you didn't have to do any of this." "I know," I said. "That's why it matters." It had redirected me. The collapse didn't happen all at once. It unraveled. By the following Monday, the legal blogs had moved past speculation and into analysis. The headlines shifted tone from gossip to cautionary tale. Inside the financial freefall of Williams and Cross LLP. When vision isn't enough, the cost of ignoring fiduciary reality. Former allies distanced themselves with surgical precision. Invitations stopped. Calls went unanswered. The same people who had applauded Daniel's confidence now questioned his judgment behind closed doors. Vendors filed claims. Associates quietly updated their resumes. Junior staff whispered in hallways, wondering who would be next to leave. Daniel tried damage control. He released a statement, carefully worded, lawyerly, empty. It framed the crisis as a temporary restructuring challenge. It thanked the community for its patience. It didn't work, because facts have weight and receipts have memory. When the story finally reached national business publications, the narrative crystallized. A law firm built on borrowed power, undone by arrogance and public cruelty. Daniel's father stopped returning his calls. Evan disappeared entirely. Rumors circulated. Panic attacks, consultations with his own attorneys, frantic attempts to negotiate exits that no longer existed. I didn't watch any of it closely, not out of mercy, but because I didn't need to. I had already stepped away. Phoenix Legal Collective opened its second office within a month, then a third. Cases moved faster. Families stayed housed. Immigrants received hearings they had been denied for years. The work spoke for itself. Meanwhile, Williams and Cross LLP shrank. Not dramatically, just enough to be noticed. Daniel resigned from leadership quietly, citing personal reasons. He stayed on briefly as counsel, stripped of authority, stripped of illusion. The firm rebranded within weeks. His name vanished from the door. When I ran into him months later, by chance, on a quiet street in Soho, he looked smaller, older. We exchanged nods, nothing more. There was nothing left to say. The fallout wasn't loud. It was final. And in that finality, I felt something unexpected. Peace. 6 months later, my life looks nothing like the one that ended under crystal chandeliers. And that's a good thing. Phoenix Legal Collective now operates in 3 boroughs. Dozens of attorneys work cases that will never make headlines, but will change lives forever. Families stay in their homes. Workers recover stolen wages. People who were invisible to the system finally feel seen. I teach twice a week now, not because I need to, but because I want to. Students don't ask me about revenge. They ask about boundaries, documentation, power, and what it means to protect yourself without becoming cruel. I tell them the truth. Love doesn't require blindness. Support doesn't mean surrender. And loyalty should never demand your self-erasure. Daniel moved away. I heard he works at a nonprofit now. Maybe he learned something. Maybe he didn't. Either way, it no longer affects me. What stayed with me wasn't the betrayal. It was the reminder that strength isn't loud, that dignity doesn't need an audience, that the most powerful response to humiliation is not retaliation, but redirection. The best revenge isn't destruction. It's built. And if there's one lesson I hope anyone watching this takes with them, it's this. Never confuse access to you with entitlement to you. Because when you stop funding someone else's illusion and start investing in your own truth, everything changes.